muted, but we'll work through this. All right, well, welcome everyone to this year's President's Showcase of Undergraduate Research Excellence. You're in the room with our FSU Tech Fellows. So these are students who are involved in the Entrepreneurship Fellowship, where they spend a summer working side by side with entrepreneurs, as well as specifically with business incubators around the state. So as a part of that program, they conduct a qualitative or policy, or even in this case, a SWOT analysis for one of our students' research project that coincides to their interests in business and entrepreneurship. I'm also hedging a little bit because we're leaving some time for people to enter. Oh, right. I also want to double check something because I know I have a student who's not supposed to be in here. Cameron, can you hear me?
I went ahead and clicked on that link and it brought me back to this room.
Then someone accidentally went into pasted the wrong link. All right, Joy, because I did not have access to those things. One thing I will double check for you then is we may have it in a different spot. I appreciate everyone's patience in dealing with this.
Sorry about this.
Yeah, so the same link is there within this other one as well. And I did not have access to this. What I'm going to do is in the background, I will do what I can in terms of finding you the link and troubleshooting. The other thing, what we can do is putting into the chat is the literal program. And that should have all the proper links for you versus having something. You should be able to link directly to that spot. I will triple check its access for you. Yep, it goes directly to it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem. Sorry for the delay, everyone. All right, let's get this party started. As we've already had a lot of fun in dealing with this virtual environment. So as I mentioned before, we've got 4 presenters, all from the Tech Fellows for the 2021 Tech Fellows program, presenting their research that they conducted over the summer and into the fall, largely engaging with experts in given fields of their interest. So our first presenter tonight is Talia Mendoza. She is currently a senior majoring in political science and international affairs. Her internship over the summer was with Starter Studio down in Orlando, Florida. She also, simultaneously being part of Tech Fellows, is actually part of the CRE's Global Scholars program. So she was working hard this summer, dealing with some complex issues, including her presentation, focusing on student perspectives on mentorship. Outside the classroom, Talia has also been chair of the College of Social Sciences and Public Policy Student Leadership Council. In addition, she plays a rather substantial role with the local Southeast Peace Jam. She's served as a communications and community outreach liaison for the Peace Jam Foundation. In fact, just came from a whirlwind trip from Colorado to meet a lot of interesting individuals from around the world. So I will stop from there and allow Talia the moment to share her screen and begin her presentation.
Thank you so much, Dave. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Talia Mendoza. Like Dave mentioned, I am a part, or I was a part now, of the FSU Tech Fellows cohort, the 2021 cohort. And this summer, I actually completed my summer internship with Starter Studio, a 501c3 nonprofit in Orlando that helps startup companies. So they do this through different entrepreneurial programs, and it all depends on what stage these companies are at. So I actually have a huge passion for social impact work, and I do have a very keen interest for the concept of mentorship. So I thought that it would be great to kind of combine both topics, which is why I did my research on how students interested in social impact work perceive mentorship. So this project pretty much aims to see how social like-minded students perceive mentorship throughout their experiences. Through this, to reach our conclusion, I kind of identified 5 major themes which I felt were important for this topic. And this topic also, or the project also aims to distinguish ways in which a mentee and mentor pair can improve the relationship. So I just want to quickly mention some of the students that I interviewed. So we have Emma Kiley, Marvin Suarez, Paola Duran, Randy Gonzalez, Frankie Villa, and Nika Alexander. So all of these students have been involved with different social impact related projects for some time now. So that's the reason why I interviewed them. I did use qualitative research. So I used surveys, interviews, and observations. The first step throughout this research project was sending out in-depth surveys to multiple social like-minded students who currently are mentees or have been mentees in the past. Then I went ahead and randomly selected 6 out of those 30 students to conduct an interview with them. And lastly, I was able to observe some of the relationships between the mentee and mentor relationships. So I did this for about 3 months, and I pretty much observed each relationship once or twice throughout the duration of those 3 months. So the 5 themes that were identified were: first, who do students consider as mentors? Next, it was hopes and expectations from the mentoring relationship. We also looked at trust in the mentor and the satisfaction with those relationships, the preferable length of the mentee and mentor relationship, and lastly, how students perceived quote unquote forced relationships versus those that came naturally. So for this first theme, the students actually identified 2 different types of mentors. So they identified the formal and informal mentors. So for informal, they considered those as parents or relatives. And then the more formal mentors, they considered them as teachers or university appointed mentors through research or retention programs, specifically like Europe, or those mentors that the Center for Academic Retention Enhancement offers you. Some of the big concepts during this theme were genuineness and intentionality in a mentor. The students did mention that it was really important that the mentors had some kind of intentionality behind the relationship and that they were intentional to the best of their abilities. They also mentioned that they would rather have that long-term support rather than short-term. And they felt as if the mentors had the idea coming into it, then they knew that it was most likely going to be successful. Next, we talked about hopes and expectations. So the students actually identified 3 distinct sets of hopes and expectations. One being that they hope that the mentor helped them in their personal life and help them become a better person overall. So not only helping with that academic side, but also with that personal side, you know, especially with people nowadays or going through, you know, mental health crises, things like that. They also wanted the mentors to help them excel academically and professionally, specifically by providing them with some type of network opportunity. So bringing them in, you know, with different people, connecting them, having those connections. And lastly, they did expect the relationship to last at least a year. So all the 6 students did say this. They felt that consistency was important. And especially because social impact related projects do take time. So it would make no sense to have a mentor only for about, you know, a month or 2 when these projects take a really long time, just because they have to be so intentional. So according to the Harvard Business Review, by mentoring the whole person and not limiting your conversations to career matters, you will have an even greater impact, and that will be felt by your mentees and everyone that they influence for years to come. So this just kind of contributes to that cycle. So, you know, you mentor someone, then they go ahead and mentor somebody else, and it's a constant cycle that contributes to the kind of individuals that we have in society. Next, we talked about satisfaction and comfortability. So 4 out of the 6 students who were interviewed mentioned they had 2 relationships they were 100% satisfied with, and 2 out of the 6 mentioned that they only had 1 that they were satisfied with. All the students did collectively agree that most of the time they trusted a mentor. So the reason was because the mentor trusted them first. So the fact that a mentor has that trust first allowed them to kind of play back. They did talk about comfortability a lot. It did play a big role in the satisfaction of a mentee and mentor relationship, because if not, it was something that they would consider as forced. And speaking of forced, then we talk about the natural relationships. So the students were more satisfied with those relationships that came about naturally, and I will talk about this later on. But it was interesting to see, why is that? So students did feel like those naturally acquired relationships worked better because there was more of a genuine connection to support, learn, and teach one another, not just have that one-sided relationship. Next, we talked about the preferable length. So once again, they did mention those long-term relationships, and everyone that was interviewed collectively agreed on this. Like I said, minimum a year. Based on experience, those longer relationships equated to more success in various capacities. So, it brought the question of how do we define success, and, who's to say what success means. So the way that I identified success throughout this research was success as the students saw it, because at the end of the day, these relationships, these mentor and mentee relationships are to benefit them mainly. So they did say that longer opportunities equated to more stable relationships, which you do need that. Nobody wants to have a relationship that isn't stable. But they did find an exception, which was interesting. And that was that short-term opportunities did help them fulfill long-term goals. So kind of contributing to that short-term gratification, and that those short-term goals are as important or equally important as those long-term ones. So one of the students that I interviewed actually said, I seek for long-term meaningful relationships. I want to create friendships so strong that I could potentially invite them to my graduation or even wedding, which was super sweet. And I think that's the kind of relationship that everyone kind of seeks. And lastly, we talked about those quote unquote forced relationships with those relationships that came naturally. So the students were more satisfied with those relationships that came naturally because they felt like there was more of a genuine connection. Those forced relationships did feel like a task or burden, and they equated to short-term relationships. So that brings up the question of whether or not there might be some type of correlation. The students did talk about how they lost contact with the mentors. So this kind of led to them losing their momentum in whatever goal or project they were working towards, which eventually led them to not to either end the project or not do it to the best of their abilities. And lastly, that delayed student success. So these forced relationships can hinder and delay the impact of student success. But with that being said, thank you so much. That is the end of my presentation. Right here, I actually have a picture of myself and one of my biggest mentors, Bree Shannon, who works with Peace Jam Southeast. So I want to thank the center, the CRE. I do want to thank Starter Studio, the Peace Jam Foundation. Those are the individuals that pretty much helped me pursue that passion for social impact work. I also want to thank the donors who helped sponsor my internship this summer, the Center for Academic Retention and Enhancement, and lastly, the many mentors and family members who did help me along the way. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Talia. If anyone has any questions for Talia, we've got a couple minutes for Q&A. Please put them in the chat. May not have some automatically, but let me ask, why mentorship? Is it the experience from Peace Jam that had you more interested in this?
So I've kind of always been interested in the concept of mentorship, and I think a big reason a big reason was because I did have really good mentors along the way, some of which I still talk to this day, and who I met when I was like in middle school and even elementary school, like I'm talking about second grade. So it was always something that I kind of had a passion for, but I think that working with the Peace Jam Foundation really solidified that passion for mentorship, because I saw the importance of it, and I saw how important it was to the success of young students and having them become really great citizens in society and ultimately in the world.
Wonderful. I got one of the things, and we had a discussion before about this, but could you reflect more upon that idea of the forced mentorship that we see? It's a prominent thing that's used at universities and care and in other spaces.
Yeah, so a lot of the students did talk about those forced relationships, which I never really thought about in that way, but it was interesting to kind of hear the responses. And I know we had a conversation about them. It's interesting to see if maybe that's the reason as to why some students end up becoming mentors themselves. And I've definitely found myself in those situations where I've had one of those, quote unquote, forced mentor-mentee relationships. And I was like, I would never do this to somebody else, to a mentee. So it kind of made me want to give back. And an example of that would be, I actually had a mentor through Big Brothers Big Sisters when I was younger, and she was definitely not the best. I ended the relationship, and ever since that day, I said, I'm going to do that whenever I can. So I actually, a couple months ago, I actually ended up being matched with a little through Big Brothers Big Sisters Big Ben. So it's something really exciting. But yeah, it's interesting to see how those forced relationships work and whether or not they're successful for these students.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I hope other people pay attention. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next speaker, LaPadre Proctor. He's actually kind of a hometown guy from Midway, I think, technically, but it's kind of a Tallahassee guy. He's now a second-year student majoring in mechanical engineering. And as you'll see from his presentation, he has some clear interest in the automotive industry. So he internshiped over the summer with Tallahassee's own Domi Station. As part of his project, he conducted a SWOT analysis examining consumer electronic vehicles market. Outside the classroom, LaPadre is involved with the National Society of Black Engineers and the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. So getting involved early, as he was. LaPadre, I'm going to go ahead and ask if you want to share your screen and get started.
All right, thank you, Dave. I'm about to share my screen now.
Yeah.
All right. All right, everyone. So as Dave said, I was a part of Domi Station this summer. I had my internship at Domi Station, which is a nonprofit company. And pretty much we work to help build up beginner businesses. They can come and join through one of our programs, and we help them build up their business through the many programs that we have. So here's my presentation. It's on the transformation of the car industry. So my research, the way I've done my research is through a SWOT analysis, which is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats on how electric vehicles will affect the market and also how they will affect our environment. But before I get into that, I want to give some general knowledge, show some companies off, show off some electric cars that I like, and I think that you guys would like to see also. So some sources that I've used are I use the source, the Web of Science from the FSU database. I use Crunchbase, the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, and some other articles that I just found interesting while doing my research. So I just want to talk about how things have changed, how time has gone by. So, we first started off with horses and carts and walking on foot. So far we've came a long way. There's a lot of people that are kind of scared of change when it comes to the electric vehicles. But the way I feel about it, I feel like we've came a long way with the things that we've done so far. So why will we stop now? Why should we stop innovating when we can keep on going? So with modern gas cars, we have a carbon footprint that we're leaving every time that we drive. We're making a carbon footprint. And this is something that our people in the future are going to have to deal with. We're using fossil fuels that aren't really renewable. And in the past, people weren't worried about the environment, but now it's becoming way more apparent. And that's why I think electric vehicles should be advanced and more should be created. So one of the biggest forms of pollution is the fossil fuels that keep cars going and the pollution that comes from cars using that gas. So as you see on the left, this is a Model S Tesla. Tesla is one of my favorite electric vehicle brands, by the way. But I just want to talk about the addition of electric vehicles. So with all the pollution that I mentioned earlier, electric vehicles started coming into play as a way to lighten the load on the environment. And these cars don't have to rely on fossil fuels. They get their energy from the power grid, which is at the charging stations. They get their energy from the power grid where they charge their vehicles. So now I want to talk about what else can be done. So on the last slide, I showed off a Tesla. You're probably thinking, oh, this is just my car. How am I going to affect the environment? So there's also companies such as a company named Workhorse. So as you see on the left, those are two vans. Those are actually electric vans that are used for transportation. And this company Workhorse, they sell these vans and they pretty much sell them to companies. So they're actually getting companies to switch over to using electric vehicles. And a lot of pollution comes from companies that are traveling all day long. As you think about UPS, think about things like that, or just think about semi trucks, think industry. These are vehicles that are going to be riding along all the time, just driving, just constantly just polluting. So if we turn these into electric vehicles, just think about how much we could save the environment. So as you see on the left, this is a semi-truck from a company called Nikola. This is a Tesla competitor company. Tesla also has their own semi-trucks, but I just wanted to cover other companies too. So semi-trucks and other forms of transportation vehicles take up a large percentage of the pollution that is accounted when it comes to vehicles in general. These vehicles are just constantly being used. As I said, they're carrying, they're hauling for businesses. These are vehicles that are going to be on the road all the time. So if we were able to switch to electric vehicles, at least in the industry, that alone would affect the industry so much. So here is a pie chart that I wanted to show off from the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency. So as you can see here, they covered the emissions from each sector. So we have the agriculture sector here, we have the commercial and residential, industry, and we have transportation. As you can see, transportation is 26%. Now, mind you, this was in 2014, and the transportation sector has gotten even bigger now. So you can imagine, but as you see, transportation is the second biggest. So we definitely got to work on getting that down. So now I'm gonna get into my SWOT analysis. That was it for like the general information. So I just wanted to talk about the strengths for electric vehicles. So for one, obviously they're safer for the environment. They will save consumers money and switching from gas to electric. When you use electric car, you can go to charging stations where you have to pay, but majority of the time you could just charge it at home and save your money. EVs have better performance than gas cars. So we have some people that, they like their fast gas cars. They want a fast car. They want something that can go fast. Well, electric vehicles actually have better performance than gas cars. So if you're worried about performance, then you have nothing to worry about. Also, EVs they don't need maintenance as much. So if you think about your gas car, you have an internal combustion engine. And this is something that needs to be oiled. So that's why you have to get your oil changed, because there's moving parts that are constantly moving that need to be oiled down so they can move better. With the EV, you wouldn't even have to worry about this. So now I'm going to get into the weakness. So this is one reason why people are kind of scared to get into EVs, because this is one reason why people are scared to get into EVs. Now, when you do go to a charging station, it actually does take time. So think about when you're charging your phone. You don't charge your phone. You don't just go from 0 to 100. It may take, 15, 30 minutes to charge your phone. And if you think about it, these EVs have batteries, so it's very similar. It's going to take you a little bit of time to charge at a charging station, which is why it's best to charge at home. When you go to sleep, you could just charge your car then. Also, there's a lack of charging stations. So if you think about gas stations are everywhere. And it's not the same for charging stations, especially in smaller towns and smaller cities. Mainly in bigger cities like Orlando, kind of like travel cities, there's actually many charging stations. So depending on where you live, you could have a lack of charging stations that would take you away from wanting to get a electric vehicle. Another weakness that I wanted to mention is battery degradation. So if anyone in here has maybe like an iPhone, less than like an iPhone 10, I'm sure that you've noticed by now that your phone battery doesn't last as long as it did when you first got your phone. So as time passes on, your battery just gets weaker, I guess you would say. And people are worried about this in their cars, and they're scared of long-term use. There's people with gas cars who, they've driven their car 300,000 miles, 200,000 miles, and they're scared that if they switch to an EV, it won't last, because there's some people who want their cars to just last forever. So now I want to talk about the opportunities. So electric vehicles have opportunity to make a lot of money. So in India, there's research that's going on from the Center for Energy Finance. So they're saying that by 2030, the EV market in India will be a $206 billion opportunity. Yes, I said $1 billion. So there's a lot of profit to be made. Even in the stock market right now, if you look at the Tesla stock from where it originally started, the Tesla company, their shares have passed pretty much every other car company. So when it comes to the stock market, when it comes to finances in general, your best bet now is to invest in electric vehicles, because they are the future and you do not want to get left behind. So here we're going to talk about threats. If you see this picture on the right side, this is a picture I have of the power grid pretty much. This is how it is at a charging station pretty much. So you have your database, you have your charging management system, you have your digital electric meter, and you have your local area network, and you have the utility grid. So the utility grid is actually what provides power. The utility grid does use gas, but also it uses renewable energy sources such as wind, water, and things of that nature. So you have your charging stations, you have your electric vehicles down here, and you have your solar panels for, getting solar energy. So one big threat to EVs if they are produced too quickly. So as I've said, there are many charging stations, but it really depends on where you are. So let's just say now today we were to create maybe 3 million electric vehicles. So we're going to need to compensate and add more charging stations so there's actually a place for you to charge your vehicle. So the EV industry is going to take a lot of money, but it's also going to earn a lot of money. So if you think about it, for every car that you produce, you're going to also want to take time and you want to take consideration and say, okay, I need to put a charging station here. If I'm selling cars in this state, I need to put this many charging stations in this state. So as we produce more vehicles, we're going to have to also produce more energy for these charging stations. So in conclusion, I support electric vehicles and I believe in them. I believe the strengths outweigh the weaknesses, and there's still way more opportunities for them to become even more advanced. As time goes on, these vehicles will get way better. As of now, we're just starting now, and they're honestly amazing. The threats that they pose aren't that bad when you consider the good things that will happen, and we'll have a safer, cleaner environment. I believe it was by 2050, President Biden wants there to be at least a 50% sale on electric vehicles anyways. So regardless of what you think, they're kind of coming. So it's kind of best to get adapted to them and start thinking about how you're going to adapt to getting one. You don't necessarily have to get one because gas stations are probably always going to be around for the next, 50 years at least. With our current environment,
I got to stop you, Padre, because we're about to eke into Shamar's time.
Oh, okay.
No problem, but I appreciate you being as thorough as you are. And in addition, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the EV market. And I think most of us in some ways can share that enthusiasm.
My bad. You actually can't see her pin like when you're presenting. So be mindful of that, Shamar. I actually didn't know.
Okay.
But thank you, everyone.
So this the hint towards Shamar and Nicholas is make sure you toggle so you can see Melanie in terms of timing. In addition, if you've got a timer on your phone, go ahead and utilize that. All right, so we're gonna keep rolling along. In addition, we're gonna take some time for Q&A at the end of this and leave a few minutes at the end to pose questions. So whether it's now or later on, you can still post questions in the chat for the presenters. All right, who is Shamar Charles? He's a junior majoring in computer engineering. He, along with Le Padre, interned at the Tallahassee Domi station previously. So I know he came directly from the lab to this event, and possibly maybe the same lab, I don't know, that he did when he was in Europe. So he's currently engaging in research on multiple levels. He also has participated in the Florida Georgia Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation, another program here in the CRE that works to empower minority students in STEM fields to graduate and then move on to college. I'll let Shamar introduce his own project and how it relates to remote work and our post-pandemic lives, if we can call it post-pandemic yet. But I'm excited to hear from this young man. Shamar, please share your screen and get started.
Okay. Everybody can see that? Oh, the third part. All right. Thank you, David. As he said before, hello, my name is Shamar Charles. I'm a junior studying in computer engineering, and my project was on the effects of the pandemic on the tech employment. So over the summer, I had interned for Domi Station, and throughout that period, I had became really interested in understanding why employment today was actually changing and how COVID had really affected how employment had really been overall, considering that the interview that I had for Domi was all virtual, and most of the stuff that was done during my internship was through online, with the later half being in person. So I really was very peculiar by that, and decided to do my research on how has COVID really affected that in terms of employment in other fields that I am interested in. So for my project, I have really outlined on 3 questions that I really wanted to answer. These questions were how COVID has played a role in thingy. Sorry, my thing is, I might have to quit this. Sorry about that. How has COVID played a role in hiring within the tech-related fields? How have companies responded so far to these changes? And how can we as a new generation prepare for these said changes? So in my research, I really outlined on understanding how has COVID really changed the workforce. And since the pandemic had started, the push for remote work has been driven up, with even companies now accommodating it in their hiring process on either being remote or being hybrid. And in a research done by JobVite, over 200 recruiters were surveyed, and of those 200, 84% had adapted to accommodating remote work in their workforce, due to the intensity of how COVID was over the period of last year. Likewise, conducting interviews has also changed from being in person to now being over Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, and many other video applications that really focused on trying to create that sense of professionalism between them and the employers. And in essence, it showed how COVID really affected the world of jobs and how companies were doing their best to prevent the further exposure and maintain the normalcy of a proper workforce. So in the way that companies have responded is that they've really changed their ways of trying to push their jobs out there into the real world. Instead of doing in-person interviews and posting stuff over just inside their stores and things, they really focused on advertisements and had like a full push for those. Nowadays, you see multiple jobs being posted on LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Snag a Job, and multiple other sites with abilities for anybody to really apply for these roles. And in a research that I really looked at, it showed that all these jobs, they were really focusing on just building up their workforce, and really didn't look at the experience that the person had, and really focused on rather experience more and building it up to meet that demand of constant users that they regularly had. As previously mentioned, with hybrid and remote work being readily more available in the hiring stage of the field of technology, in the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, it showed that of the 31% of establishments that are here in the U.S., 51% have now, 51% being of information industries, were incorporating telework as an employment of their fields. And this also pushed for the more incentive of having more cybersecurity and cloud-based jobs to meet the demand of their online consumers. So overall, in this period of time, it became really relevant to have more IT specialists, and hiring became very high, and began to create such a spree, which allowed more people to become hired and meet the demand of digitalization. Over the week, I was able to interview with the Dan Foss Senior Human Resources, Christina Chansey. And I really got to ask her some of the more pressing questions that I really wanted to know that I could get outside of research, and really understand how has COVID really affected a technological company. What she's told me is that basically it became more of a competition after vaccines started to roll out in the beginning of 2021, and market became so competitive with a lot of positions becoming more available, and a lot of companies trying to fight each other on whether or not who will getting the more better employees and offering more benefits to that individual. So overall, oh, no, I didn't want to do that. Let me see if I can go back. My apologies. So today, they told me that over 30% of their staff remaining on site are participating in remote and hybrid work. And really, they've decided to diversify their workforce to more accommodate to what the worker wants and based on their position. So for, say, if you were a student interning at Dan Foss, based on the position that you would apply for, you're basically get the option of whether it being on the company campus or being able to do everything from virtual, as well as similarities to the actual workforce person. And in addition, they also decided to change their way of sending out job opportunities by more focusing online, as done by my research through LinkedIn, Snagajob, and FSU's Knoll Network, and changed their way of doing face-to-face interviews to doing it over Zoom. So I decided to, in the end, that the best way to prepare for these certain jobs that were coming into the future is to really get yourself familiarized with your workspace and knowing what you're really applying for. Like to actually have an understanding of how to maintain your professionalism and understanding what you can expect during an interview. You know, whether or not you wanted to focus more on becoming a remote worker or hybrid or doing it face-to-face, you really have to look at the benefits that are with it and what really aligns with your values. So yeah, that was the end of my presentation. These are my references. Here are my acknowledgements. I want to say thank you to David, FSU Tech Fellows, the Center for Undergraduate Research and Academic Engagement, Domi Station, Chip Wyckoff, and Dan Foss.
Thank you, Shamar. Anyone have any questions? Put some in the chat. I already know what I'm going to ask you. What's your, when you leave Florida State, what's your desired office life like?
If I were to leave FSU, I really do like the idea of being able to interact with my fellow employees. I really got to experience that around the later half of Domi Station. It was very fun being able to meet other students there and other workers and really participate within the group instead of being online, you know, looking at the computer. It was really fun, and I really got to enjoy all the first Fridays that were attended and got to meet a lot of people. So I would say face-to-face is for me.
So when you're working for some engineering firm in the future, you're going to want that face-to-face connection.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I do not want to stay on the computer, even though I'm a computer engineer.
All right. Computer engineer that actually enjoys interpersonal communication.
I know.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Just double checking the chat, make sure we don't have anything else. Double check our timing here. We're on time, we're on time. All right, last but certainly not least is Nicholas Perez. So Nicholas is a junior majoring in commercial entrepreneurship. He interned specifically with Starter Studios in Orlando, where specifically he actually did some substantive research beyond this project on helping them devise and understand whether or not they want to launch their own agri-tech business accelerator. So a lot of Nicholas's work went directly to the future of Starter Studio. He's also an avid hospitality worker with a goal towards, once he leaves Florida State, of opening his own restaurant post-graduation. I can't wait to see what it is and getting a reservation. So I'm going to mute myself and let you share, Nicholas.
Two seconds. I'm an old man, so I'm bad with tech. Okay.
You really are. You are.
Okay. So, as you said, I'm Nicholas Perez. My research topic is a qualitative evaluation of the effect of COVID-19 on local restaurants in Central and North Florida. Let's get started. So background, tourism is Florida's #1 economic driver. The #2 economic driver is actually agriculture, but the statistic of tourism versus agriculture was a significant difference. So 35% of the workforce is connected to tourism. That is the umbrella term of hospitality. It can mean restaurants, bars, hotels, amusement parks, you name it, it's in that 35%. So roughly 589,000 Floridians in the hospitality industry due to COVID have either been laid off or temporarily unemployed. This has significantly stayed the same. It hasn't decreased that much due to benefits and the slow rollout of vaccines. It is getting better, but it's still a big issue in the hospitality industry. So I wanted to do my research more focused on local restaurants. I've been working in restaurants since about 15 to 16 years old. So it means a lot for me to do this research. And I found that in Florida, the number of restaurant closures is 26,180 compared to the average of other states, which is only about 9,210. So the number of unemployed people is about 234,465 individuals in Florida in restaurants, compared to the average of other states is only 97,079. So a lot of these numbers are really significantly different. Florida has been extremely impacted, which is also shown with the economic losses in Florida due to the impact of COVID-19 on restaurants being 4.4 billion compared to the average of other states, which is only 1.8 billion. So this is a graph just to show you, just to reiterate my point of restaurants really struggling, especially in Florida. They're really similar and really close to the statistics of shopping, but 26,160, it's increased. And 60% of those were permanent closures, 40% were temporary closures. That is declining, but it's still significant because a lot of restaurants are having a really hard time finding people to work and getting out of debt so they can reopen their doors. So the way I did my research is I have a lot of connections in the Central and North Florida community, and I talked to local business owners and I asked, what is the scuttlebutt? Miss Denise Hilliard is the proprietor of the original First Turn Steakhouse and Lounge, which is in Port Orange, Florida, where I'm from. And this was my first job, and she is a great mentor, and this is what she had to say. I ended up closing the doors of my restaurant after 37 years of being in business. One of the hardest things I've ever had to say goodbye to. 37 years is a really long time to be in the restaurant industry. Most only last to about 15 years, and it takes about 2 to 3 years just to break even when you open a restaurant. The original First Turn is a staple of the Daytona community, especially because the Daytona 500, so it was really sad that this happened. Another restaurant is Off the Hook Raw Bar and Grill. I also worked for the restaurant owner. This is located in New Smyrna Beach. Also has another location in Ponce Inlet, Florida. Mr. Mike Shaler is the proprietor of this restaurant, and I talked to him, and this is what he has to say. Before the pandemic, my restaurants were booming. Now I'm struggling to pay utilities, the mortgage, and my employees. They rely on my business to feed their families, and I don't know what the future holds. This quote had significance, and this is why I put it in here, because it's not only just the business owner. It also affects the people that work for that restaurant. Those families that rely on that paycheck and those tips and all that good stuff. When you go to a restaurant, they rely on that to feed their families. So it's an ecosystem, and it's definitely a delicate one. Anyways, so this is Jeri's Midtown Café. It's located in Tallahassee, Florida. I worked as a part-time cook here for a little bit. I do not live there anymore, so I don't work there. And this is owned by Miss Jericho Madden. So Miss Jericho Madden said, I've received government aid and have partnered up with other restaurants to do services like care boxes filled with groceries that we offer to our customers. So my restaurant isn't suffering that much. I think in the long term, however, I want to be able to sustain the amount of business. We won't be able to sustain the amount of business we are currently doing right now. It's just not enough. So this is a good example of a restaurant that sort of tried to adjust, I guess, their business model to COVID-19. And it had short-term benefits, but in the long run, it's not sustainable. And this is the same story for a lot of other restaurants. And lastly, this is History Class Brewing Company. It's located in Panama City Beach, where I am living currently. It's owned by Mr. Alan Branch. And he had to say COVID-19 has changed the whole demographic of our restaurant and how it really started to enhance the brewing company. Now we are utilizing local delivery system like contact delivery, contactless food operations, which have actually helped them expand their food concepts. The ability to change things up is the reason that they're doing so well. The only reason I put this in is it's a more positive note because they actually were doing small plate concepts instead of actually like serving food. And then they opened their small plate concepts at the beginning of COVID. And because it was so new that they had time to adjust. So it actually helped them be profitable instead of hurting them, which happens, you know, to some of the restaurants. Anyways, themes and recommendations. For my research, I concluded that COVID-19 has completely reset the hospitality industry in Florida, leaving thousands without jobs and local business owners in debt. The pandemic has totally blindsided local restaurants in the Sunshine State and all over the world, leaving many to wonder what the future holds. On a positive note, a lot of businesses that were able to survive have moved to contactless delivery, mobile and online ordering packages, mobile kitchens like food trucks. They're all the new norm of the restaurant scene in the United States, which I think is a touristic revolution underway in the hospitality industry in the United States that could be for the better. Things I would like everyone to keep in mind when going to a restaurant, that most of them are still completely understaffed and have horrible supply issues all around the country. Please be aware that wait times are significantly higher and patience the virtue. A lot of the restaurants are fighting to keep their doors open, and you have to, you know, just show them gratitude and tip accordingly. If you don't want to deal with wait times, just look up some recipes, get a cookbook, and cook at home. You know, you don't have to go out. So that's just my PSA. Anyways, here are my references for all the statistics. And then my acknowledgement, Bill Lixon, FSU Tech Fellows, all the people I interviewed. So Miss Denise, Mike Shaler, Mr. David Montez, he's awesome. Guy I did my internship with, Mr. Robert Reed, he's awesome too, and all that good stuff. So, questions?
Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you.
Definitely, like someone who has worked in the restaurant industry a lot, got to throw in there, tip your waitress at the end, and where possible, tip your kitchen. Any questions in the chat? So I've got a question for Nicholas. So you're a strategic thinker and you've been obviously involved in hospitality for a very long time. Let's say investors, you've got a group of investors, we'll say it's the people from MadSo, right? And they're like, hey, we want you to launch a new restaurant within the next year. What are the things you've learned from COVID adaptations that you would definitely have to use in this restaurant? What do you think of the foundational things that will have longevity that will, you know, make that revolution happen?
As far as like, if a hospitality group came to me and said, you know, what are the new standards of a restaurant as far as COVID? I would say that as far as not really social distancing, but as far as operational practices like sanitation and food preparation is extremely important right now. Most of the staffing should be vaccinated. I believe, you know, that's a really important thing, especially when you're preparing food. You know, like if a cook has COVID, he accidentally has some spill come out of their mouth, goes on the food, everyone else is going to get COVID. But I would say, yeah, so hygiene is extreme importance, but also a lot of restaurants need to consider not actually having a brick and mortar anymore as well. Remote and mobile kitchens are actually really popular right now. I know a lot of restaurant owners that are actually taking their brick and mortar and moving into a food truck because they can, for one, travel to local venues all the way around, their local community, as well as not having to worry about paying leases and stuff, you know, getting around all of the really expensive factors that are happening as we reset our hospitality expectations. So, you know, just a few things. All
right, we finally got a question. Aaliyah asks, what was the most interesting fact or lesson you learned from this research project?
I guess the most interesting fact that I learned was that like you just got to keep your head up. You know, a lot of these restaurant owners that I talked to, I honestly like I was asking them about such a hard topic, you know, because it's one thing if you're an employee and you're laid off, you can go get another restaurant job. There's a billion out there. But it's another if you are a restaurant owner and you close your doors, you're stuck with $1 million to $2 million worth of debt. You know, it's a lot bigger of a deal, especially because a lot of these restaurant owners tie everything into their lives. You know, their mortgages and their bills are paid through the amount of profit that they make from the restaurants. But a lot of the people that I talk to actually, you know, they obviously talk about their devastating losses, but they were sort of relieved and optimistic. You know, they really just showed a lot of strength and a lot of courage as far as getting through the pandemic, something that they've never lived through. But you know, like my boss, Miss Denise, she just bought a RV and she's retiring, and she bought a property in DeLand, which is like 30 minutes away from Daytona Beach, and she has a couple goats and she's living life. You know, I mean, she hated that she had to close a restaurant, but she got to retire. And you know, it's the same story. Every single restaurant owner is showing a lot more strength than I thought, and you know, makes me want to keep my head up as well. So
That's great. I'm glad Denise is able to retire and relax that way. I do also want to personally thank everyone, Talia, LaPadre, Nicholas, Shamar. I know this past year has not been easy. These students came into this program, one, not naturally wanting to engage in this type of research, but they know they're interested in entrepreneurship and business. They want to get the experience through the internships. In addition, they also had to suffer through, you know, largely everything being virtual, which is not what you're looking for when you're trying to establish relationships in the business world. So those difficulties have been hard. We jokingly say in our text thread, the hardest summer to be a tech fellow ever. And it's meaningful because they also didn't get it because of budget things from COVID. Just like restaurants, we had less budget and we were only able to give them so much of a stipend that we previously were able to. So I appreciate the long suffering of these students, but also hope I know in many ways that they got a lot out of it in other ways, and were able to persevere through it. With that being said, I've thrown up and shared the final slide, the resources slide for everyone to take a look at. Feel free to take a picture, scan the interactive wall, the Padlet activity, all the CRE resources, whether that's the social media, whether that's the next round of idea grant workshops, as well as signing up for our monthly newsletter if you actually read your email. That'd be nice. And then, of course, you see the bit.ly for our program for finding registration links for our next round of sessions. All right. I wish we were doing this face-to-face because I'd give you all a hug and tell you how such a great job you guys did. We'll find a way next semester. All right. Thank you everyone for being a part of this session, and go find some other interesting creative projects to peruse and learn about. Thank you for joining us. They're dwindling and dwindling.